I poured this into my dead garden, and thousands of worms showed up in 3 days. 3 months ago I was standing in what used to be my vegetable garden, looking at what could only be described as a patch of concrete masquerading as soil. The tomatoes had withered, the lettuce looked like it was pleading for mercy, and even the weeds had given up. After years of chemical fertilizers and neglecting soil biology, my garden was essentially dead. The soil was so compacted that water just ran off the surface, and when I dug down, the earth felt like clay pottery that had been fired in a kiln. That's when my neighbor, a retired soil scientist, walked over with a knowing smirk and a mason jar filled with what looked like dirty water. "Pour this into your garden," he said, "and come back in 3 days." I thought he was pulling my leg, but desperation makes you try things you'd normally dismiss. What happened next completely changed how I understand soil health and transformed my approach to gardening forever. By day 3, my dead garden was teeming with earthworms. Not just a few scattered specimens, but thousands of them creating a living, breathing ecosystem beneath the surface. The secret wasn't magic, expensive amendments, or complex chemistry. It was something far simpler and more powerful than I ever realized. The game-changing solution: worm tea. The mysterious liquid my neighbor handed me was worm tea, also known as vermicompost tea or worm-casting liquid fertilizer. This isn't the commercial stuff you buy in bottles at the garden center. This was the real deal. A concentrated biological soup teeming with beneficial microorganisms, nutrients, and growth-promoting compounds that earthworms had processed through their digestive systems. Worm tea is created by steeping high-quality worm castings in water, creating a liquid concentrate that contains all the beneficial bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nutrients that make earthworm castings so valuable for plant growth. When you pour this biological cocktail into depleted soil, you're essentially inoculating it with millions of beneficial microorganisms that can restore soil health in remarkably short periods. The reason my garden responded so dramatically wasn't just the nutrients in the worm tea, though those are substantial. Worm castings contain nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and trace elements in forms that plants can readily absorb. More importantly, the tea was introducing a complete soil food web that had been missing from my chemically treated earth. Understanding the worm response phenomenon. When I poured that first gallon of worm tea across my 100-square-foot garden plot, I was unknowingly sending out a biological dinner invitation. Earthworms are incredibly sensitive to soil conditions and can detect favorable environments from surprising distances. The microorganisms in worm tea create chemical signals that attract earthworms, while the improved soil conditions encourage them to take up residence and begin their transformative work. Earthworms are attracted to soil that contains the organic matter and beneficial bacteria they need to thrive. Dead, compacted soil offers them nothing, which is why they avoid it entirely. But when you introduce worm tea, you're creating pockets of biological activity that serve as beacons for these soil engineers. They can sense the presence of decomposing organic matter, beneficial bacteria, and improved soil structure that the tea provides. The rapid response I witnessed isn't unusual when soil conditions shift from hostile to hospitable. Earthworms can move through soil networks and even travel across surface areas during optimal conditions, typically after rain or irrigation when the soil moisture levels support their movement. Within 72 hours, they were not only present, but actively working to improve soil structure through their constant tunneling and casting activities. The science behind rapid soil transformation. What makes worm tea so effective goes far beyond basic fertilization. When earthworms process organic matter through their digestive systems, they create castings that are biologically active and rich in beneficial microorganisms. These microorganisms include bacteria that fix nitrogen, fungi that form beneficial relationships with plant roots, and enzymes that break down organic matter into plant-available nutrients. The tea extraction process captures these microorganisms in a concentrated liquid form, along with humic acids, fulvic acids, and other organic compounds that improve soil structure and nutrient availability. When you apply worm tea to soil, you're introducing millions of beneficial microbes per milliliter, instantly beginning the process of rebuilding soil biology that may have taken years to degrade. The microorganisms in worm tea also produce plant growth hormones, including auxins, cytokinins, and gibberellins, which stimulate root development and overall plant health. These compounds work synergistically with improved soil biology to create conditions where plants can access nutrients more effectively and develop stronger, more extensive root systems. Creating your own worm tea. Making effective worm tea requires high-quality worm castings and proper brewing techniques. Start with castings from red wigglers or European nightcrawlers that have been fed a diverse diet of kitchen scraps, aged manure, and carbon-rich materials. The quality of your input materials directly affects the biological diversity and nutrient content of your finished tea. The basic ratio is 1 cup of worm castings to 1 gallon of non-chlorinated water. Chlorinated tap water will kill the beneficial microorganisms you're trying to cultivate, so use well water, rainwater, or let tap water sit for 24 hours to allow chlorine to evaporate. Add 1 tablespoon of unsulfured molasses to feed the microorganisms during the brewing process. Steep this mixture for 24 to 48 hours with gentle aeration. You can use an aquarium pump with an air stone, or simply stir the mixture several times throughout the brewing period. The goal is to keep the microorganisms alive and active while extracting the maximum beneficial compounds from the worm castings. The finished tea should have an earthy smell and may develop a slight foam on the surface, indicating active microbial populations. Strain the liquid through cheesecloth or a fine mesh strainer, and use the tea within 24 hours for maximum biological activity. The remaining solid material can be composted or worked directly into garden beds as a soil amendment. Application techniques for maximum impact. The timing and method of application significantly influence the effectiveness of worm tea. Apply the tea during cooler parts of the day, either early morning or evening, to prevent the beneficial microorganisms from being killed by UV radiation and heat. Soil temperature should be between 50 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit for optimal microbial survival and activity. For severely depleted soil like mine was, apply worm tea at full strength directly to the soil surface and water it in thoroughly. This ensures the microorganisms penetrate into the root zone, where they can begin establishing beneficial relationships with existing and future plant roots. In less severely damaged soil, you can dilute the tea with an equal amount of water to cover larger areas. Reapplication every 2 to 3 weeks during the growing season maintains and builds upon the initial biological improvements. As earthworm populations establish themselves and soil health improves, you can reduce application frequency while maintaining the benefits through the natural cycling of nutrients and organic matter that healthy soil biology provides. Long-term benefits and soil transformation. The transformation that begins with earthworm colonization extends far beyond the immediate presence of these beneficial creatures. Earthworms create extensive tunnel networks that improve soil drainage and aeration, while their castings continuously add nutrients and beneficial microorganisms to the soil ecosystem. Their constant movement mixes soil layers, distributing nutrients and organic matter throughout the root zone. Over the months following my initial worm tea application, I observed dramatic improvements in soil structure, water retention, and plant performance. The previously compacted earth became crumbly and well-draining, while retaining moisture during dry periods. Plant roots could penetrate deeper, accessing nutrients and water that had been previously unavailable. The increased earthworm activity also attracted other beneficial soil organisms, including beneficial nematodes, soil mites, and various bacteria and fungi that contribute to a healthy soil food web. This biological diversity creates a self-sustaining system that continues to improve soil health and plant productivity over time. Troubleshooting and common mistakes. Success with worm tea depends on avoiding several common pitfalls that can reduce its effectiveness or even harm soil biology. Never use fresh manure or uncomposted organic matter in your worm tea, as these can introduce harmful pathogens or create anaerobic conditions that kill beneficial microorganisms. Always use fully processed worm castings from healthy worm populations. Temperature control during brewing is critical for maintaining viable microbial populations. Brewing temperatures above 85 degrees Fahrenheit can kill beneficial organisms, while temperatures below 45 degrees significantly reduce their activity levels. If you're brewing outdoors, consider the ambient temperature and adjust timing accordingly. Over-application can actually harm soil biology by creating nutrient imbalances or anaerobic conditions. Start with recommended dilution rates and application frequencies, then adjust based on soil response and plant performance. Healthy soil biology develops gradually, and patience yields better long-term results than aggressive over-treatment. Scaling up for larger gardens. For larger growing areas, consider establishing permanent worm composting systems that can provide ongoing supplies of high-quality castings for tea production. A well-managed worm bin can process kitchen scraps and garden waste while producing castings year-round, making worm tea production economically viable for extensive garden areas. Commercial worm tea brewers and aeration systems can handle larger batches while maintaining proper oxygenation and microbial activity levels. These systems pay for themselves quickly when you consider the cost of purchasing equivalent amounts of biological soil amendments and the improved productivity they enable. The transformation of my dead garden into a thriving ecosystem proves that soil biology can be restored quickly when you provide the right conditions and inputs. That simple jar of worm tea was the catalyst that turned lifeless dirt into living soil, and the principles behind this transformation can work in any garden, regardless of size or current condition. Your soil doesn't have to stay dead, and you don't need expensive amendments or complex treatments to bring it back to life. Sometimes the most powerful solutions are also the simplest ones, hiding in plain sight in the natural processes that have sustained plant life for millions of years. If this guide helped you understand the power of worm tea and soil biology, subscribe to Plant Place for more practical gardening solutions that work. Share this video with fellow gardeners who are struggling with poor soil conditions. Together, we can transform dead gardens into thriving ecosystems, one worm at a time.